So in this video, we're going to define work-based learning. We're going to share examples of learning programs that are doing it well. We're going to talk about the skills necessary for a great work-based learning program. We're going to tap into some pro tips that we've learned along our way working with great schools. And we're going to talk about the vital importance of documentation and reflection from students in a work-based learning workflow. So my name is Aaron Schorn. I'm an educator, technologist, and school leader that has really leaned into work-based learning for my entire career. I've built summer programs that were all about connecting youth with mentors in industry as they get their ideas out into the world. I was a former K-12 capstone coordinator, managing work-based learning experiences in 5th, 8th, and 12th grade. And now I'm incredibly lucky to be able to work with hundreds and hundreds of educators and school leaders as they build out work-based learning programs in their states and districts. Simply put, work-based learning is an educational strategy that provides students with real-world learning opportunities. It gets students out into the community, it gives them an idea of different career trajectories, but it also allows them to have experiences that shape their personal qualities just as much as their professional qualities. So there's all types of work-based learning, formal, informal, work-based learning that captures an entire 4 years of an experience or just a couple months or a semester. There's CTE, career and technical education, where you have formal pathways that a student goes in. And then you have internships, which can be short-term or long-term. You have externships, you have consulting projects. There's something really cool called client-connected work, where students are doing work with businesses and nonprofits in their area and solving real problems. Work-based learning gives your student population an ability to engage with your local community and a wider community. And that's what I love about it too. Work-based learning is not just a field trip. It's a bridge between being a student and a professional. It allows students to grow as human beings. It allows them to engage with a totally different population of people. And it creates this immense human capital, these great relationships that they can carry with them well after. So now I want to talk about why work-based learning is so important for a school or a learning community. Our students find themselves in this VUCA world. VUCA is a term I learned from the brilliant Scott McCloud at CU Denver. It stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And that is 100% what all of us are in right now. And work-based learning is a really great answer to a VUCA world because it allows students to test out their skills. It allows students that have not traditionally succeeded in an academic setting to find different places to succeed. It gives them the ability to be seen in ways they haven't in the past. It allows them to gauge with adults and other mentors outside of school and build real relationships. For the teachers, it allows them to be a coach, a facilitator, a connector, and not just a deliverer of content. It allows them to help students in their own pathways, and it teaches them the skills of project management. What I love about work-based learning is that it's a community uniter. It allows students to understand their wider community, the businesses, the nonprofits, the local officials that make decisions. It allows the community to see what a school is actually doing. In fact, I've seen in so many work-based learning districts, the community cares so much more about the school because they understand it. They're working now side by side with remarkable students. What I realized in my own work as an educator is it also builds purpose. And what I mean by that is it allows a student to see that the skills of communication, the skills of data, the skills of math are immediately applicable when they're out working on a project or connecting with people, right? And it's not like wait until you graduate or wait until you get into the workforce. They're seeing it in real time, these really important skills. So let's talk about the skills required for students to thrive in work-based learning. We've already talked about this uncertain landscape, this complex landscape the students are finding themselves in. So think about the technical skills that would allow a student to thrive in that landscape. Leadership, character, adaptability, communication, creativity, critical thinking, but also metacognition, self-implication, mindfulness, fortitude. Really pull from what your school or district has already named, whether you have a portrait or a graduate or key competencies. Think about like what makes your learning community unique when you also think about the skills that you'll assess your students on, or the skills that will be looked at, data compiled over the course of a student's experience. One of the things I love about work-based learning is it gives students experiences and time to learn technical skills that will be incredibly important for them post high school. Skills that might be career focused, welding, graphic design, culinary. It gives them the ability to build a kind of tool belt of technical and soft skills that will allow them to thrive in the future. Even how they use AI to build is a big, important technical skill into the future. Let's talk about like real world outcomes for students in work-based learning. Students come out of this many times with industry certifications, concurrent enrollment where they can start college as a sophomore or a junior. They come out with relationships that lead to internships and jobs right after graduation, or they find key mentors that they get to tap into throughout their college and early career experience as well. Most importantly, they accrue wisdom, wisdom that can only be accrued through having experiences that are real. In many ways, it's a de-risking factor, right? Everyone talks about like the work-based learning program where you found out your love of culinary skills and now you're a baker and chef. But just as often, there's a power in realizing what you do not want to do with the rest of your life. I have been to dozens and dozens of exhibitions of learning where everyone wanted the kid to say, and because of this culinary experience, I'm going to be a cook. But many times they say, because of this experience, I don't want that. And that's exciting for me because now I'm not going to go down that road. Work-based learning is a gift. It gives students knowledge and wisdom years before they would have had it in traditional schools. For any district that's worried about inclusivity, um, work-based learning is a light that can be shown on students that typically did not get recognition. I had so many students in my work-based learning communities that got D's and C's in traditional academic classes, but thrived in internships, thrived in projects that were connected to the real world. They needed that like purpose, right? They needed to understand that the skills they were accruing and acquiring had impact on themselves and the wider community. Now let's make this real by sharing with you some real examples from learning communities that we've seen, that we've worked with, and that we admire. One community I love is the Lower Yukon School District. So LYSD realized that in order to have a really strong work-based learning program, students had to have this foundation of belonging and confidence. They really leaned into EQ. They leaned into social and emotional learning to make sure that students felt this sense of pride, this sense of confidence, even before they started diving into work-based learning experiences. And then there's Cañon City High School. Cañon City is one of the most community-engaged learning communities I've ever gotten to witness. What makes Cañon City so remarkable is that work-based learning is embedded throughout their entire 9-12 experience. It's not just one CTE program. Traditional classes tie into a student's professional journey. And there's so many great public exhibitions of learning along that journey. They just welcome the community in. There's this really cool school in the Research Triangle in North Carolina called Cary Academy. Cary Academy shuts down the school for 2 weeks, the traditional school. And for 2 weeks, half of their student body does work-based learning internships, not just in North Carolina, but across the country. And they do such a remarkable job of sharing that documentation and reflection across the student body, right? So even if I'm having a great internship, I can see what my friends are doing. I can learn from their experiences. They've created this kind of like communal work-based learning community within their school. And in a similar vein, there's Gibson Eck, which is in Washington. And Gibson Eck has this thread of a personal project all 4 years, an internship all 4 years. Students on campus for 3 days a week. They're off campus doing internships for 2 days a week. And they have these great design lab classes that build technical skills that are super, super important and relevant for all of the other work-based learning work that's there. what I see as a common thread throughout all of these successful use cases that I shared is a commitment to curriculum that builds really vital technical skills for students so that when they have these work-based learning experiences, they're prepared and they're set up to succeed. And these schools are so enmeshed in their community and they've localized what makes them special and what makes their district and community special, right? If I'm thinking about CTE, they're not choosing pathways because they sound good. They're choosing pathways because their community is doing those things. From my years of working in work-based learning, and now in my job where I get to work with hundreds of learning communities, here are my tips of success for work-based learning. First and foremost, have students capture their process and allow them to use multimedia to capture that process. And let me tell you a story on why that's so important. So in Alaska, we work with this really cool district. And the year before we started working with them, they had a student who so clearly had the technical skills of becoming an electrician that they expected her to immediately get an apprenticeship. But she struggled as a writer. And they didn't have a way for her to capture in the moment or summative documentation and reflection of those skills. And now we're working with this district, and there's another student who wants to become a welder, also struggles as a writer. But he, over the course of this year, has been able to capture in all forms of multimedia his growth, his personality, his work ethic, and his work product. And that will help him get this welding job that's coming up in the next few months. Another big tip is to build regional partnerships. Find other organizations, chambers of commerce, local government officials, for-profit businesses, nonprofit businesses. Basically create your ecosystem, not only of where your students will do internships and not only will you have subject matter experts flow into your building, but where you can go in on grants, right? Where you can kind of build an ecosystem of partners. Another big tip is to move from compliance to quality, to not just have an operations flow of work-based learning, but to have a culture of work-based learning, to not just have boxes that are checked. When work-based learning is something that you can backwards design from, right? When you can say to faculty in 6th grade or 9th grade, okay, cool, we have these experiences. Let's talk about the skills and experiences our students can have in your class, even if it's a traditional academic class that will prepare them for this internship, for this CTE pathway. And then you create this kind of scope and sequence plan. You're shifting from compliance to a culture of excellence. One of the things I've realized from a lot of awesome schools that we work with is that having a foundation of human skills, social and emotional learning, is really important, either before or side by side a work-based learning program, especially in middle school. And as you go into kind of 9th and 10th grade, it's a foundation, right? That you're building the rest of their work-based learning experience on. And again, like what's so cool about work-based learning is they get to see those skills in action and they get to see them in a really important way, right? Sometimes we like over SEL an experience and the kids are just rolling their eyes at us as we're doing yet another kind of SEL workshop. But when a student actually understands why communication, collaboration, critical thinking, why the skills of empathy are super important on a day-to-day basis in a work-based learning experience, their buy-in is remarkable. I think we constantly see work-based learning emerge in high school. It's really important to start in middle school. It doesn't mean that a 7th grader has to do an internship. What it means is that you have to bake in the skills of work-based learning and kind of safe experiences early on so that when they hit 9th grade, they can run with it, right? And I remember working with freshmen and sophomores that had technical skills and like in graphic design and coding and writing and communication. And then we were able to just play. We were able to basically build a laboratory where they could build things, right? And so I view middle school as a place to get some of those technical skills in early, and then also really lean into the soft skills of what makes a great work-based learning program possible in high school. A big tip that I have for any work-based learning program is to rethink assessment and to rethink documentation and student-led reflection. It's incredibly important that you can see a trajectory of a student's experiences from grades 9 through 12 in a way that is consumable for the student, the parent, industry, and for a school. And that is rarely done through a standardized test or through a portfolio that a student put together at the very end of their senior year. Summative documentation that is connected to skills is really, really important in work-based learning. And empowering a student and teaching a student to be a storyteller, a journalist of their own learning, giving students access into each other's learning is a really important part of work-based learning as well. What you're trying to do is empower a student to understand themselves, to capture their experiences, to feel worthy enough, to feel a sense of belonging and confidence to capture their experiences, and then gain the skills of metacognition, where they're looking back at their experiences and making meaning and seeing their growth in real time or over the course of 2 or 3 years. And then curating when they're able to take a story, depending on the audience, whether that's a college admissions person or someone that they're trying to get a job with right out of high school, or even their parents, right? That skill of curation is going to be so vital in this future that our kids find themselves in. We built Unrulr as a story catching tool, as a way to celebrate process just as much as the products of learning. We want students to be able to document in a way that feels authentic and easy to them via video, audio, photos. And one of the most core parts of the tool is this idea of a community taking its portrait of a graduate skills or competencies, its durable skills, and turning them into tags or badges. Why I'm so passionate about Unrulr and work-based learning is it allows a teacher to see growth in real time. And it allows a community to celebrate a learner that might not always have been celebrated. And what happens is a student, whether they're in the middle of their experience or at the end, has this living and breathing portfolio that celebrates and curates who they are, their technical skills, their experiences. And that's super important in this VUCA landscape, in this volatile landscape we find ourselves in. So to conclude this video, work-based learning is a common sense way to prepare kids for a world we cannot predict. Work-based learning allows students to get wisdom earlier in their lives by getting meaningful experiences connected to technical skills, soft skills, and academic skills. Thanks for watching this video. Thanks for your interest in work-based learning. I'm a bit biased, but I think that documentation and reflection, capturing evidence of learning, is a crucial part of work-based learning. And if you believe that too, or you want to learn more, come check us out at unrulr.com or connect with me at aaron@unrulr.com. Thank you.